Coming up next on Correctional TV, we'll continue our coverage of Rikers Island out of control. More sexual abuse against staff from inmates. Also, a former lieutenant from Alabama receives a 9-year prison sentence for failing to stop an attack. And finally, 2 more TDCJ officers are indicted out of Abilene. Stick around for this and much more. Welcome to Correctional TV. Breaking news out of Missouri. A local TV station, Fox 2, is reporting another officer has been assaulted at the Bonne Terre Prison. This comes after a prison staff member was stabbed by an inmate this last week. In a rare move, a former officer who resigned in fear for his own safety spoke out to local TV station Fox 2 in this interview.
I'd probably say within the last month, it's just going downhill, and it's going downhill fast.
Christopher Parks did not want his face shown, but is coming forward as a former correctional officer at the Bonne Terre Prison. He quit his job just days ago because he felt unsafe.
It's not worth working in a prison to where you really don't have anybody there on your back, on your team, on your side to get stabbed, to potentially lose your life.
The Missouri Department of Corrections confirms a staff member was assaulted last night by an inmate. The staff member suffered minor injuries, and this comes after another staff member was stabbed by an inmate last Monday. 2 other stabbings and fights happening the weekend before.
The staff that they do have are overwhelmed. They are afraid to go into work. They are being overworked. They're being denied time off.
Park says more needs to be done before somebody else gets hurt.
If it keeps up, in my opinion, before you know it, you're going to have the whole camp doing whatever they want to.
That former officer spoke out to support his former co-workers. Check out fox2now.com for more information on that last story. Now turning to Rikers Island out of control. Our last segment, we reported on a lawsuit involving a former Rikers Island officer being sexually assaulted. Now, another female has come forward with her own claims of sexual abuse by inmates. This comes after the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association disclosed that almost 24 officers were sexually violated by inmates this last year at Rikers Island. COBA put out this message on social media urging members of the public to contact their council members to support keeping jailhouse sexual predators locked up.
This is COBA President Benevolent. Last year was one of the most violent years in New York City's jails. Instead of helping to make our jails safer, some members of the City Council want to prevent us from separating violent inmates from the general population.
I'm a correction officer with 8 years on the job. While performing my duties, an inmate strangled me and attempted to rape me, and I was barely able to escape. Council members, what should happen to my assailant? He belongs in punitive segregation.
I'm a correction officer with 6 years on the job. A group of inmates sexually assaulted me in a housing area, and fortunately, a fellow officer brought me to safety. Council members, what should happen to my assailants? They belong in punitive segregation.
If violent criminals can be held accountable for crimes they commit on our streets, then why shouldn't they be held accountable for the crimes they commit behind bars? Call your city council member and tell them to keep punitive segregation. Everyone in our jails deserves to be safe.
Now turning to Alabama, the U.S. Justice Department announced in a press release that a former Alabama Department of Corrections lieutenant was convicted and given 9 years in federal prison for failing to stop an assault by a sergeant he supervised. Willie Burks III was convicted last year and sentenced this month for failing to stop his sergeant from physically punishing an inmate for bringing in contraband. The sergeant used a baton, his fist, and feet to strike the inmate. When he finished, the former lieutenant told him, "It's fair." Now turning to Texas, 2 more TDCJ officers have been indicted and arrested for official oppression, according to the Abilene Reporter News. Brendan Crawford and Fernando Cura are out on bond for allegedly being involved in an excessive force at the French Robertson Unit outside of Abilene. Both officers, along with 5 others, were indicted by a Jones County grand jury for official oppression for an incident that occurred around May the 20th. Remember, indictments are not convictions. All persons arrested and indicted are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. That wraps up this segment for Correctional TV News. Subscribe to our channel to keep up with the latest correctional headlines being reported from around North America.